Hi, welcome to episode 224 of the Corner of Knit and Tea. My name's Laura. I'm also known as Fluffy K on Ravelry, Fluffy Kira on Instagram and Twitter. I blog over at the corner of knitandtea.com, and that's where this show and every episode show notes will be. I have an Etsy shop called The Corner of Knit and Tea where I sell my handspun yarns, and we have a Ravelry group called The Corner of Knit and Tea. Hello, how are you? I am a little bit off. I am coming to you a day late. It is Monday, April 1st, no foolin', and I'm coming to you from Kansas City, or just outside Kansas City, as I usually do. I am sorry that I am delayed by a day. My in-laws showed up yesterday for a semi-surprise visit. I say semi-surprise because I knew they were coming by. I thought they were coming over for lunch. They thought they were coming to have lunch and then spend the night with us. So it's fine. The guest bedroom was made up. It wasn't a big deal. I made a crock pot full of chili and baked some corn muffins for dinner, and it was pretty easy, but I had planned to spend the afternoon doing some things, including recording a podcast, and then with house guests, that just didn't happen. So I do apologize. I like to try and be a little bit timely on my episodes and release them at the same time each week, but sometimes life gets in the way of that. So I hope that you have had a lovely week. Mine was pretty good. I had a few knitting issues, which I'll talk about as we get into the knitting, but otherwise the week was pretty good. We had beautiful spring weather last week on Wednesday. It was 70 degrees and it was so glorious. And then on Saturday morning it got down to 30 and we had snow flurries again, which I told you would happen. I think I told you last week. Today it is sunny but not super warm, but it is nice to at least be working with some natural light. And of course I love this time of year because it's light later and I can take more photos because I have natural light, and I like photographing in natural light if at all possible. So let's get into it. I'm feeling very discombobulated with this podcast, you'll notice. Today I'm drinking coffee. That's because my mother-in-law wanted a pot of coffee yesterday, so I made a pot of coffee, and now I have, she wanted a cup of coffee, and so I made a pot of coffee, and now I have coffee left over. So I am drinking, it is just a basic breakfast blend of coffee. I believe there is a brand at our supermarket called Cameron's, and we always joke that it is our coffee, because my last name is Cameron. And so it is Cameron's breakfast blend coffee. I put a little French vanilla creamer in it, and actually, even though it's in a mug, I'm drinking it iced because it was in the fridge, so coffee for today. Like I said, this is a weird, wacky episode 224. But that's delicious and will keep me going. I still have a couple loads of laundry to do and some work and some knitting. So let's talk about the things. This week I knit just because I was looking for a new project in front of the computer and because I was taking some photographs of for some knitting tutorials that I'm doing for some of my clients. I knit some squares. Knitter's Pride is doing a charity project in the month of May, and they are knitting blanket squares for Warm Up America. And I had a couple skeins of Kramer Perfection DK in my stash in various colors. I had acquired them a while ago. I think I won these as a prize from Spinzilla one year. Was a gift certificate to Kramer, and so I ordered some yarn. So I had a couple different colorways in my stash, and I decided I was going to turn them into blanket squares because also for taking photos for tutorials, it's nice to have a small compact piece of knitting, and a blanket square is much easier to show things on than anything huge. So the first blanket square that I knit, this is out of Kramer Perfection DK in the colorway Pucker. This is a takeoff on the Big Zig dishcloth. And I can't remember who it's by, but it will be in the show notes. And I had to do a bunch of rejiggering of the pattern because the pattern was written for DK weight cotton. And this is a worsted weight superwash acrylic. Superwash acrylic. And I No, it's got some wool in it. I think it's a 75-25. I just did a review on it. I should know better. Anyway, I did some rejiggering on it and I really like it. It's kind of fun. It reminds me of Charlie Brown. I don't know how well you can see it, but it's just like all these little zigs on it. And I think I'll probably knit another one of these to go with it. The other skein that I have is the same yarn in a colorway of cinnamon. And I do not remember what the name of this one was, but I was trying to look for something simple for demonstrating some techniques. So this is just a simple dishcloth. Pro tip that I got, and I didn't bring it with me, if you are knitting squares for charity and they should be a certain size, this is a pro tip that I got from the Warm Up America site, so I do not claim credit for it, but it is pretty genius. Go take a cardboard box that you have received something in and cut out a square the size of the square that you are supposed to be knitting. So you have a cardboard template. Then hold your square up to it. Perfect, right? Then you don't have to measure every 10 seconds. Just hold your square up to the square. So technically it's a rectangle. For Warm Up America, the dimensions are 7x9. I know Knitter's Pride is going to have a contest in May and is going to be awarding some prizes to whoever can knit the most squares. So these do not count. I'm not participating in it for that. But I just thought as part of that, I thought it would be a good cause to support. I had some yarn free and like I said, I needed to knit up some stuff for some tutorial posts anyway. So I'm just kind of double, triple, quadruple dipping, making my knitting work for me. So I have another one in progress that is cabled that I'm working on right now. I didn't end up using a pattern. I just sort of made it up on my own. And I'll probably do a few more because I think, so I know this one took about 48 yards, which is about a quarter of the ball. So my guess is I'll probably try and knit 6 or 8 squares and mostly finish up what I've got. So these are blanket squares, not necessarily to be used together, but I'll just finish them up and then I will pack them up and send them off to Warm Up America. So good cause, blanket squares done. That is the only thing that I have done so far. I just realized I forgot to draw a winner for this game. I will grab my phone partway through the podcast and we will do that. Let's talk about what I'm knitting. For the spring knit along, which is in my group and a combination between my group and the Northern Knits podcast, it is we've been calling it a bunch of different things. It's the spring garment make along, the spring cotton make along, and all the details are in my group and then also in the Northern Knits podcast group. Basically, make something for spring. You can sew, weave, knit, crochet. If you can come up with it and make it fit, then you are more than welcome to. We are emphasizing adult garments. That is sort of the only rule as far as it goes, but skirts, dresses, sweaters, shawls, pretty much anything you can consider a garment to add to your spring wardrobe. Jocelyn of the Northern Knits podcast loves cotton, and since it is spring and moving into summer in the Northern Hemisphere, you are welcome to use spring or linen blends. Grab those if you've been saving them because this would be a perfect time to create a spring garment or cottons. If you are in the Southern Hemisphere, you may craft something that is appropriate for you. If you are going into the winter season and you want to craft yourself a big wool sweater, please do. We called this the spring garment knit along, but that is very focused on where we are. Whatever season you are going into, you are welcome to participate. Like I said, the only real rule is that it has to be something adult-sized, mostly just because we want to sort of have a level playing field for people, and someone who knits a newborn sweater versus someone who knits a regular adult-sized sweater. That's not really a fair comparison. If you have like adult-sized children or like teenagers, you're welcome to knit for them. That, I mean, if they are people-sized, you know, as opposed to wee and little and tiny and it only takes one skein of fingering weight yarn, as long as it's people-sized, you are all good to go. All the details are in the group. I am sort of playing along. Of course, I'm not eligible for prizes anyway. Oh, and whips are allowed as long as less than 50% of the work has been done on it. So if you have a spring top that has been languishing, go pick it up and finish it. This one's nice and long. We started on March 20th, which was the spring equinox, and we will be going through the summer solstice, which is June 21st. So you have plenty of time to make something. I am working on my Boxy by Joji Locatelli. The yarn that I am using is Woolly Wonka Fibers in the Gaia Sock, which is a single 100% superwash merino in the mulberry colorway. And although it does not look like it, I have actually made a couple inches progress on the body. Last I checked, I think I'm at 10 or 12 and I need to be at about 16, so I just have a few more inches. I have been taking this with me to knit night and working on it there. It doesn't get a ton of work at other times, although it is an excellent roundy project, so I suppose I could stash it at my desk for during conference calls as well. Nothing huge to report on this, just working on it, getting to the underarms, and then I'll break for the front and back, and then the sleeves, and I am looking forward to getting to wear this. It is still springy here, but also we keep, partially because it is so humid here, we have to keep the AC on as soon as it gets like super warm. We probably only have a couple weeks of spring before we basically turn the AC on and it's on throughout the summer, because otherwise the whole house gets super sticky and kind of unbearable. So I will wear a top like this in the air conditioning because I spend part of summer chilled. Even though we don't have it on set to super low, it dries out the air and makes it a lot cooler. So, yeah. So that's what I am working on there. The next object that I am working on, you have seen, I almost feel silly showing this to you because there was so little progress. I expected an appointment on Sunday morning. I am getting global entry traveler status. That's like, in the US, it kind of pre-clears you for TSA and checking in on flights. And basically you pay the government some money, they do a background check on you, and then they declare you okay to not have to go through quite as many of the searches and prep work at the airport when you're going to fly. My husband has the status because he's been traveling for work. And so we thought it would be nice on our trip this summer when we go to Ireland. I think I've talked about that, but I'll talk more about that later on as it gets a little closer. We thought it would be nice for us to be able to travel together rather than him going through the super fast line and my having to go through the super slow line. So, the whole point of this discussion was I left the house super early to be there early for my appointment, and I got there 30 minutes early for my appointment and assumed that I would get to sit and knit in the waiting room for a while. And literally the second I sat down, they called my name. And I was like, but what if I hadn't been here? So I'm literally three repeats into my second sock. This is the Pebbles and Pathways sock. It is written by Marceline Smith. Hey Brownberry. I finished the first one and showed it to you last week. So I literally have maybe 1.5 inches, maybe close to 2 inches. I'm not including the cuff on that, but so it's probably like 2.5 inches with the cuff. So not very far into it. Again, a good roundy project. Might leave this one at the computer because this would be a good one. I would really like to finish these soon because they're spring socks and pretty soon it will be too hot for me to wear wool socks. I'll probably have to put them away. But I am, you know, if you knit on it, you show it. So yeah. So let's go on to the majority of what I have been knitting and re-knitting this week. So consider this a PSA from me because I've been knitting for a while, but that doesn't mean I'm perfect. So consider this a PSA for me, from me, on knitting sweaters. So I am knitting the Comfort Fade cardigan by Andrea Mowry, who is Drea Renee Knits, and I am knitting it as a sample for Zen Yarn Garden. They sent me the yarn. I'm going to turn it into a sweater and send it back to them. They sent me this lovely yarn. You won't be able to see it that well because this is the black colorway. This is the one they sent me the most of, so this is the one I swatched in. I did a lovely swatch on the recommended needle size and was excited. I got gauge. And I started knitting. I got stitch gauge. I did not get row gauge. So, let's talk about gauge swatches for a little bit. Aside from the fact that gauge swatches can lie, this one did not, gauge swatches are useful to tell if you are getting the right number of stitches per inch and the right number of rows per inch. Now, a lot of patterns you can sort of fudge the rows per inch if you're not quite getting what they want, because a lot of patterns, particularly like top-down patterns or patterns where almost all the dimensions are knit to X inches, you can just knit to X inches, and it doesn't really matter how many rows you've done, particularly if you're knitting like boxy shaped things. If you're knitting shawls, this isn't super relevant. Socks are slightly relevant because your socks will be taller and longer if you're not getting the same row gauge. But in general, if whatever you're knitting is in knit to X inches, for the most part, you don't have to worry too much about your row gauge. If you're knitting a top-down raglan sweater for yourself, and you are trying it on as you go, you do not necessarily need to worry so much about row gauge because you can kind of figure out where you are. That said, if you are knitting a pattern and you want it to come out exactly as the designer intended and you don't want to have to make any modifications, you should definitely check your stitch gauge and your row gauge. So now let's talk about what I did. I am knitting, like I said, the Comfort Fade cardigan. The Comfort Fade cardi has a couple different measurements. In the top raglan part, the raglans are worked by rows, not by inches. So basically what happened was I was not getting enough rows per inch. And so I worked all of the rows that I was supposed to on the raglan shaping and got down to where I was separating for the underarms, and I went back and measured, and my raglan shaping in the top part of my sweater was 1.5 inches longer than it was supposed to be. Now, had this been for myself, I might have ripped back a little bit and seen if I could make it work using the numbers for a different size and kind of jimmied it together for myself. For a sample that I am knitting for someone else, or if you are trying to be very precise, the answer was that I had to rip back and start over again. I had to go down a needle size, which still gave me roughly the same stitch gauge, so I'm still getting stitch gauge, but tightened up my rows a little bit, just enough that it's going better now. So basically, I had the sweater knit to just below the underarms, like where you separate for the sleeves, and then I ripped it back and started over. So that was a little bit of my knitting attacks, as the Knitmore girls would call it. And oh, I left off in the middle of a row, so this is not ideal. I shouldn't have done this. I think my husband announced last night it was time to go to bed, and then like took off like a shot, like he does often. And I just put my knitting down to go with him. So this is where I have gotten back to, which is fairly impressive considering I decided that I needed to. I worked Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, and it was Friday night that I figured out my mistake. And so it was like 4 or 5 days of knitting work that I had to rip out, and I recast on Saturday, and I'm not to where I was, but I am only about 16 more rows, I think, from separating for the sleeves. So this is where I am so far. Now the Comfort Fade cardigan gets its name because you're fading between the colors. I started up at the top with a lovely natural, and now I am fading into a silvery gray. And I am done with the fade section. Now I am just knitting the silvery gray for, like I said, I have 16 more rows, and then until I hit the right measurements. And then the next color, I have it wound up and ready to go, that I will be fading into is this silver with red. So that's where I'm at. I hope by the time I talk to you again next week, I will be much further down the body, because the plan is to separate, get it down to where I need to, separate for the sleeves, and continue to work the rest of the body. Then I'll go back and do the sleeves, and then I'll do the big collar. So I am hoping that this project will be free from future errors, but learn your lessons through me. Do as I say, not as I do. And double check your swatches for row gauge. Actually, it's interesting because I am knitting another sample right now, and I'm having issues getting row gauge, and I keep having to drop my needle sizes to try and get the appropriate row gauge, and I'm hoping that I'm going to get there, because it would be nice to cast on that sample as well. So this will be the majority of my work this week, and hopefully by next time I want to be through the 3rd color. Hopefully I'll be into the 4th color, because I would like to bang this one out. It would be really, really nice if I could get this one done in the next couple weeks, because I know they'd like it back. And oops, I just pulled some stitches off the needle. Let's put that back. So that is my work in progress, the Comfort Fade cardigan. I am down a needle size. I'm using US 5s, and the yarn that I'm using is Zen Yarn Garden, and it is a DK base. So that is my progress and lack of progress, or reknitting progress. So much fun. So let's talk about spinning. Let me grab a sip of coffee. And let's talk about spinning. Last week I showed you, well, for the past 2 weeks, I showed you a really cool braid of fiber. It was a beautiful turquoise blue all the way out to a blue indigo. It was from Corgi Hill Farm and was an 80% merino, 20% silk in one of her gradient dyes. I ended up breaking it apart into 2 vertical segments. Spinning through from, basically I started at dark blue, went all the way through to turquoise, and then flipped the other one the other way so that I started at turquoise and then went all the way back out to dark blue, and then I 2-plied it so that I got a gradient yarn. And this is what I got, and it is gorgeous. I don't think the camera is doing it justice. That turquoise absolutely glows, and then it goes through a section where it's kind of mottled with the 2 colors, where there were some splotches of white, but there's some white and there's some turquoise, and then there's almost this section that's like a little bit periwinkle in there with the blue and white, and then it goes into that indigo. And it is gorgeous. My guess is it is probably around 400 yards of yarn, I'm hoping. And it is probably between a fingering and a sport weight. I'm not sure. I'll have to wash it and see how it puffs up. It is a slightly more than 4 ounce skein. It came out to 4.3 ounces. And I will get some photos that hopefully will do the blues justice. Blues are so hard to, this is kind of a little bit better. You can kind of see the gradient there. So it's got that really, really bright turquoise in there, and then some white and blues, and then out to the dark blue. Or over to the dark blue. Anyway, this will be up in the shop this week, so if you like blues, that is definitely something for you. I went to the stash to pull out something else to spin, although if I'm being honest, I don't know that I'm gonna spin this week. My time really needs to be spent on knitting. I have a bunch of work to catch up on, so I think my hours, my crafting hours may be somewhat limited this week, and I'm gonna try and knock out those sweater samples, because both of them basically need to be done by the end of the month, and knitting 2 full-size adult garments in a month is a bit challenging even for me, and I want to be sure that I make those deadlines. So I would rather give up some spinning time now and get more knitting done up front, and then have more time to spin later in the month. That said, I did pick up a new braid. I have actually spun this one before, although not this exact one. I got 2 of them, and then I spun one and stuck it in the shop, and everybody loved it. So I'm gonna go ahead and spin the second one. This is from Nerd Girl Yarns, and the colorway is Secretly Spiders, which is a Welcome to Night Vale reference, if you listen to that podcast. It is 100% superwash merino, 4 ounces, and it is all in purples. So it is purples and black, and I think it's coming across a little bit blue on the monitor, but basically what it is it's kind of a plummy magenta and then a kind of bright royal purple and black. So even though it looks a little bit blue, it is all purples. And black. So I am planning for this to be the next spin on my wheel, although like I said, I don't know how much I'll actually spin this week. Might spin some next weekend because Wes has got some stuff going on and will not be around as much, so maybe if I'm feeling comfortable in my knitting progress, I will sit down at the spinning wheel. If not, this will come up in the next couple weeks, and this one is also going to go into the shop. So if purples are your thing, that will be coming down the pike. So that is it for me today, except I'm going to pause for just a moment and get my phone so I can run a random number generator and get us a winner. Okay, let's try this again. I am feeling slightly pressured because I am on camera now. So, there are 18 comments on the podcast from last week, which was to win a skein of the Shepherd's Lamb Rambouillet, I'm sorry, it's not Rambouillet, it's 100% fine wool from the mountains of northern New Mexico. I know that they do raise Rambouillet sheep, but this is a blend. It's a 2-ply DK weight, dyed in cochineal, and I used the other skein for my gloves. We have 18, so I am going to run the random number generator 1 through 18 and see what we get. That one's not working. Let's try another random number generator, right? Like I said, this is just fabulous content, isn't it? Okay, we're going to do Google because that seems like a good way to go. So I am putting in 1 through 18. The 5 was already in there. Don't look at that. And let's generate. And the number is 17. So now let me go back to my comments. And of course, let's see. It looks like number 17 is the, well, let's not. Looks like number 17 is the Northern Knits podcast. So Jocelyn, send me, I'm pretty sure it's Jocelyn, although if it's Diana, you'll have to let me know. Jocelyn, send me your address and I will send you yarn plus some tea. So that makes me laugh because we're doing our knit along together, but she was the 17th comment. So let's go with that. Jocelyn, you're our winner. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you have a lovely week. I will come to you again next Sunday. This time I promise I will be on time. I don't like getting off schedule. And I hope that you have a lovely craft-filled week. Until I see you again, I will say happy knitting, happy spinning, happy sipping, and I'll see you next time. Bye!